Here we are on beautiful Jones Street.
You saw Ted Jones.
What's up, guys, and welcome to the Ted Jones World Podcast. Okay, so my consensus on these drones flying around in the sky, these are the two possible scenarios that I'm pretty sure, after doing a bunch of reading, aka a bunch of scrolling on social media, I think the two possible things that we have here. One, it's either just fully the US government, they've been flying drones and they want to make sure that something is going on, that they want to make sure that things are running smoothly, whether that's checking for a BOM, you know what, B, or something. They want to make sure that the country is safe, or some of them were alien drones, and then the other drones are trying to figure out what those other particular drones are. There's no way that it's another country. And I think at some point, I was thinking to myself, I was like, you know, if I saw these drones in my backyard and I had a shotgun, I go out there and try and shoot at them, right? I feel like that's what you're supposed to do if you own a house, right? If something's flying over your house, you pop that thing. But I think that they are searching for something, or they have already found something, but it's got to be something that's already connected with our government, because there's no way it's another government and we're just like letting these things fly by. Or, you know what, maybe there is a third option here, a third situation that's going on. Maybe they're flying all these drones so then that the American people would be like, oh, you know what? These drones are not cool. And drones are only becoming more popular, you know, like maybe you'll outlaw them, or you have to have a certain license to have a drone. That's actually interesting. I haven't thought about that. If you have a drone, you need to have a license for it. It's like having a driver's license. You need a drone license. Because theoretically, if anyone could buy one and you just fly that thing, it's pretty dangerous. You could just fly it into a building. You know what I mean? And you don't even know like what's on the drone anyway, in particular. But that's what I was thinking about this week. Guys, the Ted Jones World Podcast. We're back again for another episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. And today, you know, I think we're going to talk about the State of the Union. No, we're not going to do that. But this week for me, I've had a few things change life-wise. So if you guys have ever listened to the podcast, or you've seen an episode, for the most part, I think we've probably done, I'd say realistically, like 98% of the episodes in this studio / apartment where I live. But I think going forward, we might be switching it up a little bit. I'm going to bring the studio to my dad's office because he has graciously allowed me to use the office. So for the next X amount of episodes, assuming that there's not a guest, if it's just me, I think for the most part, I'm going to hammer away at my dad's office, just because like maybe it's a better aesthetic, it's a different space, and it'll help me get out of the studio, get out of the apartment, because I'm trying to mix it up a little bit, get a little bit uncomfortable. Although the space that we're going to be doing it was like, you know, I would say nicer than the current place that I'm doing it, but we'll see. You know, I think it'll be good to mix it up. Okay, so I was actually, speaking of my dad, I was at his apartment earlier today, and he lives high up. He lives on like a way higher floor, and it's so crazy to look at New York City from a scope where you're like 300, 400 feet in the air, and you just see how many buildings and how many streets are blocked off from the sun. That's something that you people who live in the suburbs would just never really think about as much. Or maybe you do. Maybe you're like, you know, I don't want to be in the concrete jungle because there's not an X amount of sun that you're really getting per day. There's only certain places and certain avenues in New York City that really get that sun. Like if you walk down Fifth Avenue, you'll get a lot of that sun from whatever it is, from like 35th Street all the way down to Washington Square Park, and then you start to get in the mix, and there's just buildings blocking it. It's crazy how many buildings are just being built every single day. I'll tell you that, in New York City. And then also, if you're like today, I was by Madison Square Park, which is on 23rd and 5th, and they just have an enormous building going up on 31st and 5th, so it completely blocks the view of the Empire State Building. If you guys know what I'm talking about, I'm going to pop it up right here. If you guys are watching, video, you'll see what I'm talking about. But there's an enormous building. It's probably going up like 80 stories, and it's just completely blocking the view of the Empire State Building. It's like all these city planners, they're worrying about all this mishigas going on, and they couldn't stop this particular building from going up. But hey, money talks. Who knows, man? Who knows? But it seems like any building that is being built in New York City now, it's like, can we just take a second to chill on the building and figure out what we're going to do with the existing buildings that have so much vacant space in it? You know, especially when you think about the office buildings in New York City and people going back to the office, people only be in the office maybe 3 or 4 days a week. It's like, what are we doing with the rest of that space? Now, theoretically, when you think about office buildings, it's got to be a lot different than apartment buildings and other type of buildings, because there are offices that are in the middle of the building. So that, I mean, you need a window in an apartment to live. I think that's like the legal law. So changing an office building into an apartment building, obviously a lot harder than just being like, oh yeah, well, whatever, just have people live here. So I do think we need to figure out what we're going to do with that. But what would be the immediate solution? I don't know. I can't even think of it off the top of my head. What you would turn an office building, like how you turn it into an apartment building, or, I mean, but maybe you could change the law and just be like, look, maybe change an office building to a homeless shelter. Potentially. That could be a nice move. 2025 quickly approaching. As you guys notice right here, I'm coming into the camera. I haven't shaved in like a week and a half, and then this is how long my beard is. That's an annoying part about being a guy. Okay? Maybe you ladies wouldn't even know, but you know what? Ladies really have their other parts that are hairy that they need to shave, so it's just, guys, if we want to be clean shaven, we got to shave every single day. And for those of you who work corporate, maybe working 9 to 5, or you work in a job where you got to be shaved. If you play for the Yankees, you got to shave your face every single day. Isn't that crazy? That's interesting, by the way. If you guys didn't know that the Yankees need to be shaved. I don't know if that's still the law. I'll pop it up right now. But Derek Jeter was talking about how from the ages of like 18 to 40, he needed to shave every single day because the owner of the Yankees was like, he would call down to the bullpen, or he'd call down to the dugout and be like, yo, this guy needs to shave. He looks sloppy out there, which is an interesting thought, because there's so many people that rely on their facial hair for their full look, like a full beard. But for the past, I'd say probably for the past, like, maybe like the past year, I've consistently shaved easily like every 2 days. Just because I think that I love how I'm talking. It's just so random that I'm discussing this. But the bros, you guys know what I'm talking about. And then ladies, you know what? Maybe you'll find this interesting. I do find that from like the 2 to 3 day look, when I don't shave, I just look a little bit sloppy. Now maybe it looks a little bit more full. If you guys are looking here, I'm gonna look in the mirror. Also, it looks a little bit more full, so it's not as sloppy, but there's definitely an awkward period. Even when you get your hair cut, it's the same kind of situation. But I feel like my beard gets a little bit fuller, so it feels a little bit less awkward. You know what I mean? Holidays coming up. What are you getting for your loved ones? I myself, I personally, I can't even think of presents that I would want. Maybe I want some new socks. If you guys are listening and you want to send me some new socks, I would take some new socks. So I understand when dudes get older and they just don't want anything, I get it. And also, I've never considered clothes really a present. I don't need any clothes. If it says Ted Jones World on it, then boom, I'll take it. But besides that, I have so many clothes. You know, I have clothes from the clothes that I wore when I was 16 and 17 years old still fit me. So I don't need clothes if I've just had the same clothes for 15 years. You know what I mean? The jackets, the jeans, the shirts. And I feel like, for the most part, I'm done growing unless I, lose 3 pounds or gain 3 to 5 pounds, something like that. Like everything would still fit me. I think it's more of a female thing. I'm not trying to be sexist here in generalizing that all women like clothes or like new articles of material, but a girl, a woman, a female likes a new bag, right? Likes a new designer bag, I guess it's more of like a status symbol, right? Like men do like status symbols, but it comes in the form of maybe some sort of jewelry. When women, it's more of like a bag. You know, women jewelry too, like diamonds, like a diamond ring or diamond necklace, something like that. Women would love. But men, I think it's just, I think when you get to a certain threshold, you're like, all right, do you really care about the clothes? Like, I remember when I was working at my dad's company, I would just wear like ridiculous designer clothes. No joke. Like, I would have shirts that just say Gucci, or I'd wear like a Louis Vuitton scarf. That was embarrassing, man. I can't believe I did that. But that was during my promoter days. You know, like I'd go to the club, like, and I'd be like, no, yeah, bro, I got the designer clothes on. That's embarrassing, man. That's embarrassing. Or like I'll look at other people now and I'd be like, I can't believe I used to do that. And now it's just Ted Jones world on the shirt. And it's so funny, man. The amount of people that come up to me and be like, you're wearing your own merch? Yeah. How do you think Mr. Nike did it, man? He was probably wearing his own merch, right? Or had other people doing it. But I guess it's a little bit different when it's your name on it. But all these other people had their names initially, and then they had to wear their own merch. People don't really think about that. Like this guy, am I wearing it right now? This guy, Calvin Klein, that's his literal name. And I'm wearing underwear that says his literal name on it, which could potentially be sus. I get it. But when you're wearing, you know, when you start a brand and it's your literal name, that's what you got to do, bro. That's what you got to do. 2 coffees deep, man. Maybe you could tell just by how fast I'm talking. And it's been almost 11 months since I have smoked pot, which is crazy. I never would have thought that I would stop doing it for so long. And will I go back to smoking pot ever? I don't know. But it was I'd say for like probably 4 or 5 months, there were parts of my dream where I dreamed that I did smoke pot. And I'm not saying that it's bad, obviously, but it did affect parts of my life where I was like, all right, maybe I shouldn't smoke before this particular situation. If I wanted to be super locked in, or like before going on stage, I wouldn't do it, or before recording the podcast. I've said that before, obviously on the podcast, but yeah, would I go back? Would I try? Would I smoke again? Potentially, but I don't know. At this particular point, I'm like, you know, I want to see how long I can go. I don't know how long that feeling of how long I should go will last, but I don't think about it on a day-to-day basis. I find myself now the things that I have every day, it's coffee, seltzer, and probably some sort of nuts. You know, eat, guys, okay, be appropriate. I mean, like some sort of like cashews, or maybe I'll have some like sunflower seeds or peanuts. But I don't like the soybean oil and the things that they put on nuts. If I have too many of those particular things, my stomach hurts. That's why I like the raw nuts, the raw cashews. Because if I have the roasted or the too much salt, I can feel it. I can feel it in my veins, you know? Like, that's why I don't... Yeah, I mean, that was pretty random that I'm mentioning that. But like, that's why I only like certain types of nuts. You know, I don't need all this soybean oil and everything. And then if RFK has his way, Jinx, he's going to really change what the FDA can put in our foods. That's going to be crazy, because the amount of companies that rely on these ingredients that aren't legal in other countries, it's going to be quite the shift. And it's going to be better for society, but these profit margins and these stocks they're going to go down. They're going to go down because you're changing the ingredients. And maybe, I don't know if is it really going to change the way it tastes? No, and I feel like some of these companies just use these ingredients to dye the food a certain color, right? Like red 40 is like yellow 5, and like all these weird ingredients where it's like you're just using these ingredients to make the color of the food or the color of the drink a certain color so it's more appealing to the audience. Which is messed up a little bit. I gotta say, it is messed up. But hey, all for the love of the profit, right? All for the love of the business game. Gotta make those margins, man. Today, as I'm recording this, Bitcoin is at 107,000, which is insane, man. You think about all the people that have held on to Bitcoin for the last year, or even, can you imagine the people who first had Bitcoin in 2009, 2010, when it was at like a tenth of a cent, and then bought 100 of the Bitcoin? It's just like, anyone who has held on to Bitcoin this long, God bless you. I did have a solid, I think probably for the most part, the most amount of Bitcoin I had at one particular time might have been like, I probably had, realistically, I probably had maybe 2.5, 3 Bitcoin at one particular time. But I got to be honest, I use the money to live. So like when I think the most it got up to when I had it was probably like 50,000 or something, but I used it to live. You can't blame me for that. I would have actually held on to it if the time was right and I was able to use other funds, but crypto was something that I lived off of for like a year and a half, 2 years. So I needed to do what I had to do. I think there's obviously still a lot of room in crypto, but I don't know why I said obviously, but something has to, I just don't understand why it hasn't been implemented fully into society yet, where people are paying for things in Bitcoin. That's when it's going to be crazy, right? Where there's just going to be people buying coffee in Bitcoin. And I think eventually it has to plateau and level out, right? Like Bitcoin, since there's only 21 million of them and you can't I shouldn't say that. You can't add more Bitcoin to the supply. It's like at some point it's got to hit a level where it only goes up and down, like maybe 1% or 2% each year, right? This is all speculative. I don't know, but from what makes sense about Bitcoin, it's like it can't have these 20% in 1 month jumps if it's going to be the known currency. But it's all digital. Crazy, man. Like even if you bought Bitcoin at 10,000 and then you 10x your investment in a year and a half, bro, good for you. We're gonna see so many rich kids. By kids, I mean like people under 25, people between the ages of 18 and 25 get all this money from crypto, whether it's from Bitcoin or whether it's from other type of coins, meme coins. It's crazy. I did stand up this past weekend in Connecticut, and I really think there's such a difference in doing stand-up in New York City, where people are, I don't want to say spoiled to the best stand-up comedy in the entire world, versus people are planning out their entire week behind going to a show on like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Like in New York, you have, for example, you have like 5 or 6 comedy clubs all surrounded in one particular area. Like it's the comedy hub of, I guess you could say, potentially the world. And people are planning on going to these shows like 4 or 5 days in advance, when in New York City, it's more of like a sporadic spur of the moment. I think like people will be like, oh, let's go on a date to a comedy show, and then afterwards we can get drinks and talk about which stand-up comic we like. When you're in other states, it feels like it's more of like a married couple. Maybe it's an outing, a birthday, like, oh, in 2 weeks, we're going to go to that comedy show. We're so excited. And that's where I think you get the buildup of people being more ready to go out, and they're there for that particular comedy show. New York, I think the reason that sometimes it's more difficult to do stand-up comedy in New York is because people haven't planned out in advance, and they're not as eager to go to a comedy show as in a place like Connecticut or in another state in the country. Doing stand-up comedy in a place outside of New York City can be easier. And I do think, and from what I've experienced, if something works in New York City and it's a general topic, and you're not talking specifically about the subway or niche things in New York like dollar pizza, you can be more successful in other parts of the country because it's a little bit easier. The rooms are a little bit hotter. This is just from what I've recognized. And I feel like when things in New York City work, they generally will work outside of New York City. That's my take on the stand-up comedy outside of New York City. It reminds me why I love New York City so much. And anytime I get out of New York City, I've said this multiple times on the podcast, anytime I'm out of New York City for, even if it's like 2 or 3 days, I'm like, all right, I'm ready to get back. I'm ready to get back to the concrete jungle. I think it's just the energy that brings me in. Even though the buildings sometimes are too tall, you can't see the sun. I think, I don't know, it's something about the city that I love. Obviously, growing up in New York City, it probably made me used to all the hectic things that are going on all the time. But at night, you know, they call it the city that never sleeps, but at night it gets a little quiet. I guess it depends where you are. Like if you're in the middle of Times Square, obviously it's not going to get as quiet as maybe a side street, or if you're in between avenues or you're in a more quiet area. But New York is great. And if you've never been to New York, you got to visit. And if you visit, don't just do all the tourist things. Obviously, yes, see a comedy show, maybe go see the Rockefeller tree, but try and go to a local coffee shop. You know, you see something that's maybe off the beaten path, go in there. That is true New York, I think. There's New Yorkness in these mom and pop shops. Go into the deli. You like a bacon, egg, and cheese? Get a bacon, egg, and cheese. You see there's a lollipop on the stand? Get a lollipop. Do some things that are not on the lists of things that you must do when you visit New York. Go take a walk on the West Side Highway. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's maybe that's on the list of things to do when you're in New York, but try and do something that you think would be a little bit niche when you visit New York. You know, go visit that Brooklyn coffee shop that's not on the list. Go walk around the side streets, go visit Tribeca. You don't need to do everything that's on the lists. And I think when I visit other states, I find myself looking at lists of things to do, but maybe that's not really what that particular city is about. That was deep. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to the Ted Jones World Podcast. Another episode in the books. Come see a stand-up comedy show. Come see me do stand-up live. Message me, ted@tedjonesworld.com. Hit me up on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, basically everywhere there's a social media app. I'm probably on it, okay? Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next time. Peace.